Hey guys, you're on the JRB Tree Climbing channel. Let's talk about this device, the Blake's Hitch Tensioner. When I released this about a year ago, I called it version 1 right from the get-go because I anticipated there might be a way to get this thing to tend just a little bit more smoothly. This is the original incarnation. I've left it tied and I use it for comparison purposes in my testing. But to review, if I put a load here on this loop, this thing is just rock solid. There's a Blake's hitch built inside of it. And if I want to shorten it, I pull on the tag end and it just got shorter. And almost like magic, when I'm loading both strands, it goes nowhere. But when I pull on just this strand, I can lengthen it. And it's super handy in the form of an adjustable bridge like I have tied here on my saddle. But when you're using it as an adjustable bridge, instead of being tended by a carabiner, it's being tended by your bridge loop. And it's just not quite so smooth. This guy here is identical. It's just that I've got a little bigger loops there. And it's tied with 6mm TRC. And this has been a fun test for me, but if I take my finger and use it as a tending device, well, it's always easy to make it shorter. That's no problem. But when I go to make it longer, that kind of hurts my thumb to pull on that. I mean, I can do it, but if I get this thing really tight and then I try to repeat the process, like I said, that's not real comfortable. I can use my thumb as a calibration device. Here, I've got a different variant, and this is much smoother, and that's the subject of this video. Before I go any further, let's save you some time and get in tight and take a look at these two. In this version, the only difference is that it comes down and makes a 360-degree turn around these two strands. That is the only difference. But in so doing, that strand creates a lot better shelf for tending. And so even if it's up against my finger, it tends really well. And let's look at it over here in the form of a bridge. So I'm going to cover this all in one video, but here is my saddle. This is the bottom. This is the top. Here is my main bridge. What I did with the main bridge is I used a little longer tail and sat that tail on the bridge loop. I sat that tail on the bridge loop, and there's a stopper knot here. And I have my Blake's Hitch Tensioner bridge, my redundant bridge, tied on the top side. Instead of straddling this, I have it on the top side. And it is quite smooth. Okay, we're going to tie this twice. Once here in 7mm cord and once here in 6mm cord on my saddle. With the 7mm cord, I have a 34-inch working end on the right here. Now that could easily be a little bit bigger. That's the minimum I can get away with when tying this onto a carabiner. If your host device is thicker, you're going to need a longer working end. And I'll try to get in as tight as possible, but this won't be an excuse for you not to already know the Blake's hitch. You need to know the Blake's hitch before you get started with this. But there, with the 34-inch point now being pinched between my fingers and the working end here on the right, I will start to construct my Blake's Hitch Tensioner version 2. I'll start by making a Blake's hitch, a 5-wrap Blake's hitch. So that's twice around the back, 3 times around the back, 4 times around the back, 5 times around the back. Drape it down and across the front and then back up through 2 strands. So this is a 5-2 Blake's hitch. Hardest part for me is not blocking your field of view. That, my friends, is a 5.2 Blake's hitch. I'll take the tail, instead of putting a stopper knot on it, I'm going to put the tail up and over the host, up and over the carabiner. And in the prior version, I was really careful to have this really up there and snug. Well, I don't need to be quite so precise now because it will tend a lot better no matter the size of those loops. I take the working end and I go around both of these two strands and then along the host. That is really the only difference. That 360-degree turn is the only difference between version 2 and version 1 of the Blake's hitch tensioner. And then I bring it down here. Now you can go on either side of this strand. It really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. So I'll actually put a little bit of slack in here to allow me to do so. Okay, that's good enough. And then with this strand, I've got to make sure this thing doesn't flop over. And so what I do with it is I send it around the back, capturing the other part of the loop. It captures it and goes around it, and I take that and shoot it through the descending bar on the Blakes. And then here, I'm going to put in a stopper knot. I'll make it a double overhand. I'll make it as compact as I can. 1, 2. And this is what I said, 34 inches. Boy, you could just barely get this tied. Another inch cord would have likely been a good idea. Grab a carabiner. I'll put it on here. I'll lengthen it. And I'll shorten it. So I'm just getting it broken in. All right, let's zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole beast. Now, this end here, we're always going to want to have a stopper knot there, because if for any reason my Blake's hitch didn't hold, right? So I'll simulate that. My Blake's hitch is not holding and not holding and not holding. We don't want this tail to disappear. So we're going to want to put a stopper knot here as well. Going kind of quick because I'm assuming most of you have seen the prior video on the Blake's hitch tensioner. Refer to my website, jrbtreeclimbing.com. I've got a page for adjustable loops. I've also got a dedicated page for bridge designs, and this will appear in both of those pages. So I'm going to give this a really full pull. It's got most of my body weight on it, and I'll test my ability to lengthen it and to shorten it. There we have it, Blake's hitch tensioner version 2. And now I'm going to be replacing this one. Now, I've been climbing on this for several months. I test everything thoroughly and I field test it. And I'm simply going to replace this 6mm cord with Sterling TRC. Okay, so here's my saddle. On the other end, I've got, this would be the right side, I have a JRB ascender hitch, and what I did is I put the TRC cord right through the middle of it so it won't go anywhere. And on the front, I've measured a 32-inch working end. I'm working with 7 feet of 6mm TRC, which is more than enough for me. I could go with slightly shorter bridge, but I always prefer to err on the side of making something long, and we can trim it back later. So I will take the back side and flip it over. So I've got a loop here, right? I've got a loop and I'm going to close it. And this is my 32 inches going off to the right. Right there, I place this over, and that's where I will begin to form my Blake's hitch. I'll do my best to get you in and catch that action. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down and across the front, around the back, and then up through these 2 strands. You've got to know how to tie a Blake's hitch, and this is the 5-2. When I cut this 7 feet of TRC, I put heat shrink tubing on the ends, which really works great. If you need a link, look on the shopping list, jrbtreeclimbing.com. I have some adhesive shrink wrap tubing. That stuff works great. Now, what I did up here at the top, you can see this bridge. I left an extra long tail, and I shoved it. I took that tail, and I shoved it underneath here, so that it makes this just a little bit fatter, a little bit rounder, and therefore it'll tend better. So this being my working end, I'm going to flip it up and over, and on the way down, it has to go around these 2 strands, and then along the host, encapsulating those 2 strands, and it becomes a tending device. And now I've got to shoot it back down through these 2 strands. The easiest way to do that is just let a little slack in here. Let a little slack in. I can take it right back out in a minute. Okay. And now, with this working end, it looks like I got almost a foot left, but I go around the back, capturing that other strand, and up through this bar, the descending bar on the Blake's hitch. It's a pretty creative little contraption. And here with what's left, I'll create a double overhand stopper knot, and I'll create it as close to here as possible. 32-inch working end with my bridge loops just works perfect. Okay, and this extra bit of my bridge, I'll put a single overhand stopper here. Again, this is the top or the back of my saddle, and this is the crotch end. This is the left bridge loop that's up, and so I'll be operating this on my left side. What this stopper knot does, it just kind of keeps it from going anywhere. It'll never ride up or ride down. It'll always be adjacent and above my other bridge. Sure, we could have configured it on this side and used the same mechanism to keep it from disappearing. I just prefer it on top. The last piece of business is to make sure we have a stopper knot here. Double overhand stopper will suffice. Now I've tied and retied this quite a few times, and so I won't be running outside at this hour of the night to show you it in operation. You'll see that soon enough. But let's just test its ability to tend. There we go. Now note, if you've got your body weight here on this bridge loop, you've got your body weight here and you've got your body weight here, this bridge loop is going to be getting folded. It's going to be folded. And so with our weight on it, it's going to be more difficult to adjust. We want to take our weight off of our bridge while we're adjusting it. And recognize that when I pull on this line, well, it's also moving on the other bridge loop. So I've got to give that a pretty good pull. But I find that the need to adjust this bridge is rare. I leave my backup bridge, my secondary bridge, this bridge, the Blake's Hitch bridge, basically set at one length for 90-something% of my climbs, and I'll only shorten it if I'm hitch climbing. And remember, it's got mechanical advantage. It's not the cleanest system in the world, but it's a pretty good hoist. So if you needed to lift something heavy, this is a fairly good way to do it. But then to release it to come back down, that's not so straightforward, because under tension, it's difficult to release. With no weight, it's easy. So use care in your applications for it. Okay, so there you have it, the Blake's Hitch Tensioner Bridge version 2, the Blake's Hitch Tensioner version 2. Thank you very much.